to another conversation of Tell Me a Story. As you know, this series is brought to you by the Sandwich Friends of the Town Archives. This is a new project that we've started on. My name is Joan Russell Osgood, and I'm a volunteer at the Sandwich Town Archives. So I'd like to introduce to you, I'm very excited about this. We have Mrs. Rosanna White Cullity and her youngest son, John Cullity, to be with us today, and they have invited us into Rosanna's most wonderful, I have to say, historic home. And we'll be talking a little bit about that, Rosanna, because I know it has a lot of history. Maybe we'll start out with that. Could you tell me a little bit about the history of this house?
Well, this is Cedarville District School, and it was built around 1844.
46.
And it was across the street. And
I'm going to. This TV is going to be a problem.
Oh,
Yes.
right.
Yeah.
and my grandfather and grandmother bought it and had it moved up here, and they had a big farm, 60 acres, and they raised cattle and chickens and vegetables and things. And but we just bought a picture of the house taken in 1855.
Oh my gosh. Now tell me about that, because when I was here a week or so ago, that was going to be, you hadn't decided or you hadn't found out whether you were going to get that picture. Can you tell me a little bit about that and your son Brian?
Yes. Well, maybe you could tell me.
Yes.
Brian is an antique dealer, and he scouts the auction houses online. And he just happened to spot an ambrotype, which is not a daguerreotype. It was the next one to come along, of this as a school with a group of people in front of it on the original location, about 1858.
Oh my gosh.
And we were able to purchase it at the auction. He bid for us.
Yeah.
Absentee.
Yeah, like over the line with the telephone? Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so
yeah.
we're pretty excited. We haven't got it yet, but
Yeah.
it's in perfect condition, and will scan beautifully. And
Isn't that
quite a good
amazing?
size, isn't it?
yeah, it's about this big,
Yeah.
but it has a large group of people in front, adults and students, and it's like a big slice of the neighborhood.
Yes.
Standing in front of the school, so it's pretty nice.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, we'll look forward to having that maybe put on a website, probably the night.
Oh yeah, we'll be using it.
Yes, yeah. So, can you tell me a little bit about your ancestry? Because of course I know that you are connected to the Nye family.
Yes.
Could you give us a little history of that, Rosanna?
Well, my grandmother and grandfather was Rosa Armstrong and Frank Armstrong, and they had this when they first married. And then when her mother died, there was nobody on the big farm down there, and it was left to her.
Oh.
And so they moved down there, and it was called Mill Pond Farm.
Okay.
And they had, when my mother had tuberculosis when I was little, and I don't really know my mother, but anyway, my grandmother took my brother and I down there, and we lived there for about 5 years.
You did?
And they had 21 cows, I remember that.
Wow.
And it was a big farm with pigs and chickens and everything. And they used to deliver milk to Hyannisport.
Did they?
And they had a real old truck. What was it, about 19?
A 1910 Flanders
Flanders.
truck,
Oh my God.
milk truck.
A milk truck.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when my mother was a teenager, she used to drive to Hyannisport and deliver the milk. And she met Mrs. White, and she says, "Oh, you should meet my son. He would make you a good husband. He goes to sea." He went to the Maritime Academy. He was a marine engineer. And sure enough, my mother met him, and they got married.
Isn't that? So her husband didn't live in Sandwich. The Whites lived in...
No, they lived in Hyannisport.
In Hyannisport, yes. So that's how they met.
Yes.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
then my grandmother, well, they were all Nyes, and they all lived here. The father was born over in Meadow Spring Farm, And then Grandma was born in the Nye house. And what else?
So is that house, the Meadow Spring house, still standing, John?
Yes,
It
yeah,
is.
it's in good condition. It's rented, I think.
Okay.
But, yeah, that was mostly a Hoxie homestead, Quaker Hoxies.
Okay,
And
yep.
so one of our branches involved those people.
So you have, what a rich, Nyes, Hoxies, Armstrong.
Oh,
a
we're related to everybody.
Yeah. So you had mentioned that you didn't know your mom very well. How did that happen to be, Rosanna?
Well, she had, after I was born, she was had tuberculosis. It ran in the family. A lot of people had it in those days.
You didn't know,
And
about what year was that, Rosanna, just to give us?
I was born in 1920.
Okay,
And
okay.
she was sent over to Pecasset Sanitarium, and she was there for 8 years. And we used to drive over and see her through the window and so forth. But and I had it too, I guess, some form when I was little. And so then when she was going to die, my father built this, was a sun porch, and brought her home. And she did die. She died in when I was 9 years old,
When you
10
were
years
9,
old.
yes.
1930. And of course then the Great Depression started, and my father had a lot of bills. She was sick for so long. And then she had my other brother, Bob, and she never had him. They hired a woman in Macassa who took care of him till he was about 2 years old.
Oh.
And then he came to my grandmother's and lived there too.
So she died very shortly after your son, your brother Bob was born.
Well, he was probably 4 or 5 years old.
Yes.
He was 3 years younger than I am.
Yes. So he did not remember his mother either.
No.
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 I remember my father said, we're going over to see your mother, and we rode in a Model T, and I think we went on Turpentine Road. Is that the one?
Yeah, right through the base. The way to
no.
Pecasset was these miles of dirt roads.
Yeah. Thought we'd never get there. It was all woods. We went all the way to Pecasset. And I remember seeing my little brother, and I was only 3
Yes.
at that time.
Yeah.
But,
What a sad situation, really.
It
Yes,
was.
your poor mother. Yes.
We didn't know any different, but
No.
the adults had a hard time. My father was out of work every winter. He gave up the steamship job and worked for a carpenter in Austerville on some of those rich houses. And he never worked in the winter. It was too cold. It was much colder then than it is now, I think.
Well, that's good to know.
Oh, yeah. We had a lot of storms.
Yeah.
And then we shifted from house to house.
Yes.
We stayed with Aunt Delia, and I stayed with Grandma White. Grandma White, I guess we were driving her crazy. She gave us a bunch of nails and a hammer. She says, go out and pine these nails into that apple tree. It was full of nails.
Just to keep you busy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But she lived in Hyannisport, and of course she had all the modern equipment. She had bathrooms and lights.
Yes.
But we had no lights here. We had that lamp there. We had was the only light we had in this room.
Really?
And they say it was a equal to a 60-watt bulb. It has a little net of a burner.
Mantle.
Yeah,
Oh,
mantle.
oh, yes.
And you had to be very careful you didn't jiggle it because it would break. But
Yes.
we lived by that, and then we had candles to go to bed and that sort of thing. No heat upstairs, just
No
a
heat at all.
stove.
Yes.
And it was wood then, off the track.
No, you didn't. No.
It's all good.
No, this is all good.
So we burned wood when we were real small, and then my father started with coal. But I remember it was such an awful smell. It's when we weren't all dead.
Yes.
And then after that, the kerosene came in, and they had a big tank of kerosene in the back of the stove and changed the burners. So that's the way it was until, we never had lights here until after the war. My my husband used to work for the power company, and he put them in. He had to put poles in. They would never allow us to have lights. We couldn't. We're too far from the road.
Yes, yes. Maybe you can tell us a little bit. You mentioned your husband, Walter Cullity. Can you tell us how the two of you met?
Oh, yes. Well, my father-in-law was superintendent of New England Power and all over New England, and he had a crew of men that put in these lines of lights. And he came down and put the first lights. Sandwich had lights, I think a little earlier, but 1927 was when they first had lights here. And then they wanted to continue down the Cape. And so he came and made that big swath through the woods for the power line. And he had these men that worked for him, and they rented the house across from the Nye house.
Oh, yes.
And
they were the workers
Yes,
for
they were.
Cape and Vineyard, or was it Cape and Vineyard at that point?
No,
Probably
I don't
not.
think it was.
Not yet.
Not yet, yes.
And my husband, my father-in-law, and brought the family over, and they to check on these men that worked on the High Line. And he said, my husband said, I used to see kids running around there, and that was when I lived in my grandmother's.
Oh, no. So he saw you, way before you were
Yeah.
actually married.
My husband said he went 21 different schools just going through the 12 grades. They moved so much all over Massachusetts.
Yes.
And anyway, and then my father used to collect antique guns, and my husband did too. And he went to the Sagamore Rifle Club, and somebody said, if you like antique guns, go see Sam White. So he came over, and they used to shoot out the back door, and that's how I met him.
Your future husband and your father, yes,
Yeah.
used to shoot out the back door.
And Bill Foster
Oh, and Bill Foster.
and my Uncle Jack. There's pictures of all of them out there.
Oh, what wonderful pictures those would be.
And there's a big barn out back where they had. Anyway.
And so that's how the romance began.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
And then we were married, but he was shot in a few months. Then he was sent. He joined the army, and he was sent over to the South Pacific. So.
Oh, yes, yeah, yeah. So you were married very shortly before he had to ship out for
Yeah.
the Second World War.
Yeah, we
Yes.
married in April. I think he left in November.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
But what else?
Well, I wanted to get back and talk a little bit more about your childhood. Now, this, you grew up in what was called then, and I guess still referred to now, as Cedarville.
Yeah.
Yes.
It is now because I'm using the name so
Good
much.
for you,
It's
John.
coming back.
Yeah, good for you.
But it was also East Sandwich.
Yes.
Pretty much.
How did it get the name of Cedarville, though?
Well, right
Do you
out the front door here is a mile-long swamp, basically going from Hoxsey Pond to the railroad crossing, that was originally primarily Atlantic white cedar. And it was valuable timber for fencing and
Oh,
boat
sure.
building and that sort of thing. So it just was such a source of cedar. The earliest reference I've found is in the Benjamin Percival diary.
Oh, yeah.
And he refers to this area as Cedar Tree. Gonna take a load of wood over to Cedar Tree. That was what informally this neighborhood was called.
Yeah.
And around 1840, the people associated with this school started a reading circle, Friday night reading circle. And at that time, this name Cedarville was, the Cedarville Gem was the little magazine they produced
Yes.
in the 1840s. And somebody just, in a good-natured way, you know, came up with a name that had a little more sophistication to
Yes,
it
yeah.
than Cedar Tree.
Yeah. Well, that sort of makes sense. I mean, I often wonder down in town where it's called George's Rock Road.
Oh yeah.
I'm thinking, well, George's Rock Road, maybe George lived down there and he had, there was a large rock there. And as a matter of fact, I did go into one of the little houses on George's Rock Road, and the gentleman that owned it at that time invited me into the basement, and there was a huge rock in their cellar. So I'm thinking perhaps that is how that,
Oh, that's a
that
funny
road got,
probably
no, I
was.
don't know, but maybe that's how
Yeah.
that got started. So, you were a small child and into
Yeah.
your teens and adulthood living in Cedarville.
Yes, right. Well, actually, there was a Cedarville across the canal, and mail got mixed up, so
Oh.
they changed it to East Sandwich.
Okay.
They
yes.
got the post office name.
Yeah, oh,
of
before,
Cedarville.
before, yes, you did. It
Yeah.
was East Sandwich, yes.
Well, I was born here in 1920, and we really had a happy childhood. We didn't have any money, you know. We had an awful lot of corn chowder and and everybody shot ducks and deer, and neighbors all shared it. We had the privy in a pot under the bed, and we had the pump with water, and we had a stove, and if you wanted a bath, we had a bath every Saturday night. They'd open the door and have a big galvanized tub, and we'd have a bath.
Now, is this the stove, the original stove?
This isn't, but this is just exactly like the
Like
one.
it, yes.
This one came from the hallway house.
Oh, okay,
But my,
yes.
my family had one just like it.
Oh, this was in Eldred's house?
Yeah,
Oh, I didn't realize
Oh,
that.
yes,
and the sink came from there too.
Right,
yes.
right.
Yeah.
So you got to play in this wonderful, wonderful area.
Yes, of course, we slid on, everybody had a sled,
Yeah.
and we loved to go sliding. There's plenty of hills,
Yeah.
and we went swimming all the time, and climbing trees.
Oh, climbing, yeah.
I had a picture of climbing this tree. This tree is very old. My grandmother said that my mother ran over it when she was 12 years old, and so it's pretty old.
Wow, yes, yeah.
And there were birch trees in back of the barn. They were real tall. We'd climb those up the top, and then we'd swing back and forth. We'd call it tiddlies.
Oh, really? That was the name you call it,
No,
swinging?
it wasn't tiddlies. Over here on the ice, we call them tiddlies. It was, I can't think of the name.
You'll think of it.
Anyway, and we played marbles, and mostly we loved the cedar swamp and caught frogs and turtles. And they had yellow spotted turtles then,
Oh, yeah.
and peepers. And one time we caught a jar full of peepers, and they were very hard to catch because you had to take one step, and then when they peeped again, you take one more step. And we finally got a jar full, and we put them in my father's room in there, and it made so much noise in the night he had to take them outdoors. But we loved nature, and the swamp was full of interesting things. There's a big barrel sunk in the swamp, and it was always called Seaput Spring.
Oh, Seaput Spring was further over on Bob's land. but
Yeah.
Right down here by the railroad
Oh
crossing.
no, it's the one there's one in the Cedar Swamp, and then there's another one down here, because there was an old house. The railroad went through in 1850,
Okay.
and there was an old house, and it was right in the way, so they
Oh,
tore
they
it.
had to-
They didn't tear it down, they cut it in half. And half of it is the boat roof just next door, and the other half is down on the corner of Quick and Eaton House Road. They moved them,
They didn't think anything of that, did they?
No,
Moving
I-
houses, cutting them in half, putting them onto another house.
I
Yeah.
said to my Uncle David, I said, how did they get this up here, up this hill, this house? And he said, oh, they had oxen, and they made a great big round wheel of wood and a rope around that, acting like a pulley,
Oh, sure.
and they pulled it up this hill.
Oh, God, they were so industrious.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
So we had a great swim. We were always down the pond swimming, I don't know how many times a day.
Which pond did you swim in?
And down here, we call it Great Pond, but it's Hoxie's Pond.
Hoxie, but both names seem to have been around.
Yeah.
On the old map, it's Great Pond.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh yeah, Great Pond.
We
And-
call it Grape Pond.
Grape.
Yeah, we call it Great Pond.
Yeah.
And we used to go skating on it, and we had big bonfires and hot dogs and things. And we walked all through the woods, and then my brother, when he was probably about 14, he made a car out of different parts of Model Ts. There was no roof on it, and he had a green bag. And we'd all get together. Sometimes we'd chip in 10 cents or something to get gas. Gas was only 5 gallons for $1 then.
Oh my gosh, can you imagine
And
that?
we'd go, he'd drive us all through the woods. We'd go from the West Parish Church in West Barnstable to Crow Farm to Kaya's Way.
Through the woods,
On dirt roads.
on dirt roads.
And my brother said one time he skidded on Quaker Meeting House Road on the gypsy moths.
There were so many there?
We
Yes.
had so many in those days,
Isn't
and the
that
tent
something?
caterpillars.
Yes.
And the town used to go through with men with a long stick with a branch on the end and kill the nets of
Oh.
the gypsy moths.
What would they, what was the...
Creosote.
Oh, creosote, yes.
Yeah, they just
Yes.
Yeah, we had,
dampened some creosote on the net,
Yeah,
on the egg cluster.
on the egg clusters, yeah, yeah. But we still have them, so I don't, I don't know what they're using now.
well, there's an awful lot of them then.
Yes, yes.
And then
yeah.
we had playhouses. I did have dolls, but we never had many toys.
Oh, sure.
But we had playhouses, and I had at least, my girlfriend, Jackie Staples, was Jackie Snow, lived next door.
Oh, yeah.
And she was the best friend I had, and she's still living
Oh, my,
all these years.
yes,
And so we made playhouses and all these hen houses. Everybody had an old hen house.
sure.
We had 2, so we had 2 playhouses here. And she had a hen house in her yard. And then my grandmother had one. And John Bond was an old whaler that used to live across from, well, in that little old house where Nina Sutton used to live.
Oh, yes, on Old
Yeah.
County Road,
He was
yes.
from Nantucket. And he had a big hen house. And he even gave us dishes and gave us a chair.
Oh.
And we used to love to dig in the dumps, and my brothers did too. We had 2 dumps, and every farm had a dump up and back because we didn't have the dump in Sandwich.
Yes.
And we find all kinds of things in that dump for our playhouse.
So everyone, not having a central dump really at that point, everyone just used their own backyards and dumped
Yeah.
and just filled it in.
Some
Whatever the
people
lowest
use-
spot was.
Well, yes.
It seemed to work out
Yes,
that way.
yes.
Edge of a swamp. Up here there was a little gravel pit that they used, and
Yep.
it was,
The playhouses, how intriguing.
How
So, your playhouses. So you would weren't the chickens weren't in the playhouses
No, we didn't
at that
have
point?
chickens in those then. We did have
Oh.
another hen house down here later, because we've always had chickens. But they were empty. It was a big one, and my brother had half of it for a blacksmith shop.
Oh,
And there was a little platform, like where the chickens used to roost. And we got a trellis and made a stairs, so that was our upstairs.
my, you were very, very ingenious as little kids, weren't you? Yes.
And then one of the dumps, we found a big galvanized can with a faucet, so we put that on the table and a pan, and we had running water.
You didn't need to come home at night. You could just stay in your playhouse.
I guess that's why I played with them in our house. I like old houses, and I lived in a lot of old houses.
Yes. Let's talk about that. Can we talk about how your interest in antiquing was formed and how you ended up so loving antiques and working in that profession?
Well, as I said, I always lived in old houses. My grandmother's and the old houses here. Auntie Whittam's was at the end, and Nina Sutton's. And we loved to play in the attic. And there was an old organ in my grandmother's attic, which made a noise.
No music, but a noise. Yeah.
And we'd haul out all these old-fashioned clothes and hoop skirts and try them on. And Halloween, we'd go around to all the neighbors. We had a big barn out here, and when my grandmother White died, a lot of her furniture was there, and there's a big trunk full of old clothes, her really old clothes. And we'd dress up in those and go around to the neighbors. They always had cookies for us. And I guess that's why and my grandmother was always telling me we use this for such and such, and how we made heron. Heron was one of the big foods they ate around here.
Heron.
Heron, yes. There were they used a lot of over in, well, Mashpee had a lot of them. And the heron came up in the spring and laid their eggs. Mm-hmm. And people would catch the heron, and Grandma used to take them, all the people did. They put them in a big crock with a layer of salt and a layer of herring, and they leave them 2 days and 1 night, and then they'd take them out and you could bake them with the skin on.
Oh.
And I loved them.
Wow.
And everybody ate them, but
Yeah.
my husband never liked them. But anyway, then they'd take a stick and they'd stick it through their eyes, and I think they smoked them first after the salt, and they'd hang them in the attic, and they could have them months later.
Really?
Yeah.
And they they would be okay. Yes, they would not.
Yeah.
They could still be cooked, and they were still edible.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd never heard that story before.
Oh, yeah, it was
Yeah.
one of their main foods. And
Was it really?
Yeah.
How about the heron eggs? Did you eat the heron eggs?
yes, they were delicious.
Oh, I bet, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
I loved heron.
Yeah.
We used to go to Mashpee and get them, and also they smoked them for you.
Oh, they did, yes.
Yeah.
And then you brought them home.
Yeah.
Your mother was mentioning, John, her father, Sam White. And of course he was still alive when you were a small boy, and of course he lived in this house. Can you tell me some stories that you remember of your grandfather?
Well, we moved here from West Barnstable, actually, after the war. That was the only place my folks could find a house. But we moved here in 1961 to 379 Route 6A.
Yes, we'll have to talk about that a little, yes.
So that put me a mile away from Grandpa. So I actually visited him. I would walk here once a week, usually. Every week from the time I was 10 until he died in 1974. I visited him every week. And he was a great storyteller in the sense that he was accurate. He didn't make up any baloney, but he had a very good, effective way of telling a story, and could do a few accents and things like that. But one of my connections with Grandpa, he was a radio ham, amateur operator, and he influenced me. I got interested in electronics. Around 1907 or 8, he was one of the first boys on Cape Cod to experiment with radio, which at that time was called wireless. And he learned Morse code by listening to Marconi's station in Wellfleet. So he had a long background with electricity and electronics. So I'd visit him and we'd talk about this, that, and the other. But he was just a fund of information on many topics.
Many things. Can you remember a story or two that he
Well,
would tell?
the one that sticks in the mind, of course, all the boys went hunting. They had rifles, shotguns, and in the nice house in Hyannisport, where he grew up, it was a rainy day, and he was cleaning his shotgun, oiling it, he said, and it was loaded. And his father was in the next room reading the paper.
Oh boy.
So Grandpa's playing with his gun, and it went off and blew out the window. And he said, the smoke and everything, he said there were some seconds of silence, and then he heard his father say, "You there, boy?"
Really? I mean, how he didn't really know. I mean, what had happened?
So Grandpa had to learn how to repair the window and went through it. But stories like that, I was interested in mills and blacksmith shops, and he just knew all about that stuff, machinery, and he was not a farmer.
Yes.
He was not interested in farming.
Yes, yes. That was the other side of the family.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes, yes, yeah, yeah. Now the other side of the family, you talked about Armstrong. Now, of course, that's the Armstrong farm down on Old County Road.
Yes.
Yes. Of course, I remember. This would be your uncle, Lindsay Armstrong,
yeah.
don't I? Yes.
My mother's brother.
Your mother's brother, yes. Yeah. He was quite involved in, as were you, your family, in the Grange.
Yes, that was a big meeting place
That
for
was
all
the
the
big,
neighbors.
yes. Can you talk a little bit about the Grange? Because that was such an important social aspect of, I'll call Cedarville.
They always had a children's night, which we'd go and act and do funny things. They had a lot of entertainment there. People, like the women would have to put on a show, or the men would have to put on a show. And I remember Mr. I can't think of his name. They put on a imitation radio show, and he had a plunger, and he wanted somebody to talk and hold
He
it.
pulled the plunger.
And then they'd have a men's, and then they have a ladies' show, and the men's were always the funniest.
Yeah.
And then they had, I don't know where you want me to go, they had
Please.
paid whisk there, and I think it was every Saturday night, and Jackie and I used to punch their cards, and we loved that. And at 9 o'clock, they gave up the whisk, and they had dancing in there, and of course we loved that. We were just 15 or 16 years old.
Oh, sure.
And my father said, "You'll be home by 9 o'clock." And all the rest of the kids were staying there dancing, so I used to sneak out, you know. One time it was one old man over in Masters Mills, a real old man, and he always danced with us, and we hated it.
You hated it.
But Bob Armstrong danced with us. He was handsome and a very good dancer.
Oh, yes, yeah.
And so one time I was sneaking up the stairs, and the stairs creaked.
Uh-oh.
"Is that you, Sid?" And I didn't say anything. My brother said, "No, it's me, Dad."
Oh,
And he was the bedroom up ahead of me.
he covered for you.
Wasn't that a good
Wasn't
brother?
that a good brother? Yes, you had two brothers. We should make sure that we talk about them. Jack and Bob White.
Yes.
Yes, can you tell me a little bit about them? I know that they lived also in this area on Old County Road. Did they not?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Bob was entering the Navy, and Jack also joined the Army. And they're both very clever. Jack could do anything just like his father.
Yeah.
And what did he do?
Well, Jack, yeah, both of them in different ways were mechanically very good. Bob, excellent carpenter, fixed things, weld, you know, both of them had a lot of those skills. Jack was more involved in antique restoration.
Yeah, he built the house down there on the pond
Yeah,
Oh, he did,
when he
yes.
was married,
Yes.
yeah, and Bob built his house where, you know,
across from Lindsay's.
Yes. Well, you telling us just a short while ago that your brother Bob took different parts of automobiles and built, you know, put it all together and built an automobile that could go in the backwoods.
That was Jack.
Oh, that was Jack. That tells me right there
Yeah.
that he had quite a skill in that area.
Yes, he was.
Yes, yeah.
That was the first car I ever tried to drive.
Oh,
It was very different. It had 3 pedals,
oh,
and one was for stopping, and one was for reverse shifting.
shifting.
And I guess the other one was speed. And if you, no, the speed, they had a thing on the hand, on the steering wheel.
Oh,
You
really?
pull down.
Yeah.
But to get it started, you have to go out and crank it.
And he built that. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah,
Yeah.
he had all kinds of old cars up here, and he puts the parts together and everything.
Yeah. Now, excuse me, you had talked about, it is part of living back then, so we're going to touch on it. Privies.
About what?
Privies.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Well, everybody
Because
had
a
a
lot of
privy.
people don't, and younger people, you know, watching this video,
Yeah.
won't realize how important they were
Yes.
and what they were.
Yes, everybody had a privy, and it was pretty cold in the winter getting out there, I'll tell you. But they were interesting, and Jackie and I used to look in everybody's privy, you know. A lot of the houses were empty. But Auntie Whittam she lived down in the corner across from the post office.
Oh, yes.
And she had a big one. It was quite a large room. And it had 4 or 5 holes.
Oh,
A lot of them had 2 holes, but different size for children,
Oh, sure.
grandmothers. And she had 4 or 5 holes, and we'd sit in there, and the walls were covered with these old calendars with wonderful pictures all in color. And we used to sit there by the hour.
Reading the pictures. It was very important.
I remember Halloween one time, some of the boys tipped one over.
Oh my gosh.
And I think Ruth Fish was in one of them when they were throwing rocks at it.
Oh my gosh. You know that, I think that is true because I interviewed Jill Gilson not
Yes,
even a year ago.
It was down there that
Yeah,
they
she
did
had a
Yes.
story about.
And she has a story about, and I guess her dad, Jack Gilson,
Yeah.
was part of that crew
Right.
that tipped
Yeah.
over the outhouse. Yes, yeah. And she did mention that there was a woman inside. She didn't
Yeah.
know the name, but now you've identified who the woman was.
Yeah, that was Ruth Fish.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We might be hopping around a little here, but you mentioned the war.
Uh-huh.
Second World War, and your husband, Walter, having to go off to war, and your two brothers.
Yeah.
World War II was a very trying time in Sandwich, in Cedarville. People were not that wealthy to begin with,
Yeah.
and it was a very trying time. Can you talk a little bit about that, Rosanna, what you experienced and what your family experienced?
Well, we were just married a few months, and we lived on the beach in one of those cottages. And at night, they would, the police would come around and make sure you had all your shades down. You couldn't let any light. And out in the harbor, I remember one night there were 50-something ships out there. They had to wait, and then they'd be all carried through the canal, guided through the canal. And it was searchlights every night. You go out and these be going all through the sky looking for
They would.
planes. Yeah.
And where were the searchlights located? Do you know, John?
You know, Lois, Uncle Lindsay's house,
Yes,
Mill Pond Farm, along the hill. Up in back of that farm
And-
was a little encampment for the sole purpose of operating a searchlight with a carbon arc,
Oh my
big
God.
searchlight. So that's one, and I suppose there were others around. The
They were
Yes.
up and back here, but they didn't have the searchlights on the hills.
They trained. The army would use the backwoods, you know, to train,
To train.
dig holes and camp and.
Do you know who was responsible for shining that light in every night? Was there one person or was it a group of people that were in charge
It
of
was
that?
a group of soldiers.
A group of soldiers, yes.
That camped and lived on the site, I guess.
And that was their
Yeah.
responsibility to,
Yes, there was, down on Carlton's Beach, there were quite a few barracks there.
yes,
And a big lot of soldiers lived there.
yes, yeah. Barbara Gill has talked about that, and so did Jill Gilson.
Uh-huh.
Yes, that was quite something. Now, you really, things were sort of scarce to begin with.
Yeah.
But how did you manage with food and gasoline and things like that during the war?
We never had trouble with gasoline, but, well, we were poor since we were born. So we had, as I said, a lot of things that people raised or
Yes.
things like that. And of course, my father got into debt, and then when the war came through over at Otis, he got a job over there, and he told me one day I finally paid all my bills
Oh,
after all
yes.
those years.
Yeah.
And I was a telephone operator for the long distance over at Katuitt,
You were?
and not Katuitt,
Katama.
Katamet.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Was that sort of your first job growing up?
No,
No.
my first job was picking strawberries for Grandpa Torrey for 2 cents a box.
Oh my gosh.
With Jackie,
Yeah.
so that's the first
And
job.
how many did you eat?
Oh, we ate quite a few, but we had to pick all the rotten ones too.
So that was
Mr.
your
Torrey's
first.
grandson sat him on the highway with a table of strawberries and sold, and he got 25 cents a piece for selling them.
Oh, now that doesn't seem fair.
It wasn't fair.
No. And so then after a period of time, you were an operator, a telephone operator.
Well, then I was a waitress in a restaurant. Raymond's had a restaurant, and I was there. And then I went to Hyannis to the candle factory, and I used to put pine trees on the candles.
Oh.
And that was a fun job. And then I
Yes.
got the job at the telephone operator.
Yeah.
And but I had fun.
Yes.
You know, we all had a lot of fun. We didn't have money, but we just figured out jobs to do and things to have fun
Yes,
with.
and it kept you busy.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about school? Where did you first go to school?
I went to the old schoolhouse on School Street,
Okay.
and I was in the first grade, and I was there a few months, they had privies out in back for the kids, and they had, if you wanted to drink of water, they had a crock in the corner with a faucet on it. And we had cups that you fold up,
Oh,
or there was a cup there,
yeah.
and I remember it very well. And then, but they took me out because I had TB and sent me to another
Oh.
place in Needham for children with TB.
With TB.
And I was there probably for quite a few months. And so then the next year, the Henry T. Wing School had just been finished.
Oh.
And so I was in the first grade the first year it opened.
Oh, how wonderful, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was a beautiful building and we loved it. And of course, at the old school, we just played marbles or ring around the roses. But when we got to the new school, we had merry-go-rounds and sawhorses.
Yeah, yeah. You had a regular
And,
playground.
And it was a beautiful school. We
Yes.
loved it.
Yes. Still is.
Yes, I hope it
still
never
is.
gets torn down.
I know.
It's well built.
Yes, yes.
It's
I
made
think,
of bricks and wood, not with chemicals.
yes. I think Tom Kelleher got the contract somewhere in 1927 to build
Oh,
that school. Yes, I read that in an old, I think it was a Barnstable Patriot.
yes, I think it was all built by natives now.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, Pete Blake talked about the Kelleher,
Oh,
and he took a very personal interest. Pete said he made, Tom Kelleher himself made some of the ornamentation on the main door.
Oh, that beautiful main door.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
Yes.
think Pete said that Kelleher made that stuff.
I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, yeah. He built the Catholic Church
Oh, did he?
on Java Street. He built 4 or 5 Catholic churches on the Cape.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so he was quite a craftsman, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So the school on School Street, which is no more.
it was what?
The School Street School was, I guess, torn down, was it?
Yes, it was. And
Yes.
It was a huge casino right next to it.
Yes.
It was a really big building. And in 1939, I think they celebrated the 200th anniversary of the town. And they had a great big clam bake and a lot of parades and everything. And then they had a ball in the casino.
in the
And
casino.
that was the first thing I ever went to.
Oh boy, yes.
And and I remember Thornton Burgess was one of the ones that spoke. There were quite a few important people there.
And he was one of the spokesmen
Yeah.
at that. Yeah, 1939.
Yeah.
Yes, and you went and you danced.
Yeah,
Yes,
that was the year I graduated.
yes. Did you have a beautiful dress?
Yes, I had a yellow dress, I can remember.
Oh, I bet.
It's funny, in the old days I can remember it as if it was yesterday. But if you asked me what I had for breakfast yesterday, I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, I know, believe me.
And I recognize people, but I don't remember their names.
Yeah. Do you remember, I like to ask this question, do you remember in your life any big event that, and you may have already mentioned it, and that's fine, any big event that was just quite remarkable to you, and you still remember to this day, that
Oh,
happened
yes.
in either East Sandwich or Sandwich in general, or?
Yeah. Well, my father loved airplanes and anything mechanical. Of course, there weren't many airplanes in 1929. But he had $5 gold pieces that he made when he went to sea. And he saved them because he wanted to take the family up in an airplane.
Oh.
And my mother was still sick. She was here. So she was out in the lawn chair out in the yard. And my father took us to Marston's Mills. And we went up on a little plane, and the pilot was Crocker Snow. He was in charge of a lot of things all over New England, very important person. And we flew over here and circled the house twice and saw my mother.
Oh, so your mother could see you too?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
And it was funny, he was quite low. It looked like we were going to run right into the hill. But that was quite exciting.
Oh
'cause
my gosh, yes.
kids nobody got up in an airplane then.
No.
That was,
That was quite something.
Yeah.
Even in those days, yes, yes. Is there anything that we haven't shared? I'm going to ask both of you. that you would like to talk about, that we haven't chatted about, that would be nice for people to know, either as you were growing up or as an adult, that we haven't covered, Rosanna?
It's an awful lot.
Good, then share that.
I don't know, we really had a happy childhood. And I don't know, the fact of meeting my husband or seeing him when I was only a little, that was quite unusual.
Isn't that remarkable?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
But we had nice neighbors. We walked wherever we wanted. Nobody ever said, you can't go there, don't do this. And we just walked in people's houses and they welcomed us.
Yes, you knew them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Auntie Williams was an old lady who lived down the corner. We loved to go visit her. And they always had treats for us.
Oh.
I don't know, can you think of anything else?
Something has come to my mind. Living here, but of course you went to school in Sandwich.
Yeah.
How did you get there?
Oh, we went on, when we went to the Street School, we went on a barge.
A barge?
Yeah, and it was run by Marky Ellis.
Oh, sure.
And he was a real nice guy, and we had him all the way through high school. And then we had a barge. And I remember the kids in town used to bring their sleds to school, and they'd slide down that hill across from the school at noontime when we had an hour. And one time Marky let one of the boys bring the sled on the bus.
Oh, so eventually he had a bus.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was the one that the Ellises own now, the Rio.
That they have in
It
the
was-
4th of July parades?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
And-
Yeah, he had me ride in it one 4th of July.
Oh, did
Right,
he? Yes. Yeah. Now, when you say barge, could you explain that?
Well, it had curtains on the side, had the seats like a bus did.
Yes.
But it was old, of course. But the curtains, of course, it was cold in the winter.
Oh, boy.
In the summer, they rolled them up, and in the winter, they put them down. And one time, it got stuck, and the boys all had to get out and push it out. It was different. This town we only had 2 school buses, one for Forestdale and one for East Sandwich. Now I don't know how many they've
Oh, I
got.
I know. So that was really nice because they went around to the different houses
Yes,
and picked up your childhood friends,
right.
and off you went to the Sandwich School.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, yeah, that was quite something. How about you, John? I know that you have, if I may say this, even when you were a young boy, you had an old man's soul, which is a real compliment.
Well, you know, I started, as I said, visiting my grandfather, and that made me comfortable with older people and
Yes.
a few others. And when I became real interested in local history, specifically watermills on the Cape, I just was very comfortable literally knocking on the door if I knew who someone was, introduced myself, and I was very comfortable conversing with elderly people, and I had very specific questions for them, but I'd just chat and listen, and then, you know, I'd say, well, do you remember that mill down on the Bumps River? And they'd, you know,
Yeah. Once they got a little comfortable with you.
yeah,
Yeah.
and the more knowledge that I gained about local history, I would be visiting with someone, and I could share. Somebody would say, "Oh, do you remember Charlie Hilliard?" And I had known Charlie Hilliard, and I would form little bonds with the person by people either that we knew in common or I knew who they were.
Sure.
And sometimes an older person would speak of someone as if they were still alive. And you remember Tom Kelleher, don't you? And I'd say, well, I know who he was.
Yes. And that would just enrich the conversation.
Exactly.
Yes.
And it made things go. So, yeah, I was...
And I have to mention, too, that you didn't stop with knowing about all this history. You had a wonderful series of articles that was that the Sandwich Broadsider?
in the Enterprise.
In the Enterprise.
And I named it Cedarville Journal in honor of that group of people who participated in a kind of a literary blossoming that occurred around New England, you know, in the 1840s and 50s. People were appreciating their education and learning about books and forming reading circles. So my local history column was a bit of a tribute.
And I guess there were over, you had about 140 articles, right?
123.
Oh, 123, okay. You gotta write a little more.
Yeah, I gotta even it out.
Well, seriously, that was a few years ago. It would be wonderful if you might republish those in the
Yeah,
paper.
it'd be nice to
Wouldn't
know.
that be nice, Rosanna?
Yeah, it
Yes,
would.
yes.
I use photographs with each article.
Yes.
In some ways, my technique is to form my writing around a photograph or two to tell the story.
Yes, yes. I read them. I think I probably read all of them. Very, very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I'd like to mention, Joan? Earlier you asked about the Grange.
Yes.
And I just wanted to give the basic history.
Please.
And
Yes.
there was, in the local group of farmers in which our family were central, there was a sort of a progressive spirit. There was at one time a thing called the Farmers Club in East Sandwich, and they'd meet at somebody's house and probably have coffee and donuts and talk about potatoes.
Yeah, right.
Literally,
Yes.
they did that.
That was an important staple.
But in 1887, our family, Sam Nye, his wife Ruth, and their daughters met a person from Abington or somewhere, Eliza Warner.
Oh, yes.
And this young woman was enthusiastic about the Grange and was spreading the word.
Oh, sure.
And she came to East Sandwich and met with people, and they just kind of said, let's do it, let's form a Grange. And part of the interest was cooperation. Farmers cooperating to make things better for everybody. Gee, that's a good idea, isn't it?
Yes, it'd be nice to have that kind of thing. Helping people out and
Yeah.
sharing your knowledge, yes.
And the first Grange meetings were in this house.
Was it?
Which
Yes.
was called Cedarville Hall. This was used as a school on that site until 1878. It was abandoned, but this group of enthusiastic neighbors purchased it and ran it as a community hall. They had all sorts of meetings into the 1880s, and then Mom's grandparents bought it in around 1894 and moved it.
And moved it here.
1895. But the first Grange meetings were here, and then it grew very quickly, and they wanted a big meeting hall, and they wanted a mill. Old-fashioned people.
Yeah.
So they formed, in order to, the Grange couldn't hold property itself, but they formed a group that could, the East Sandwich Mill and Hall Association. Mostly Grangers, and they had shares and all this. But in 1889 they put up the two buildings, the Grange Hall and the mill, which they moved from Centerville.
Okay.
But it was very important socially, educational. They always had helpful speakers and topics, and sometimes crazy entertainment, I think, as my mother said, that they came up with. And the Grange here in East Sandwich drew from West Barnstable, Marston's Mills, as well as Sandwich. The people would come a long ways. It was a social
It was a social
center,
thing, but it
yeah.
was, as you say, they spoke on topics about, you know, how to grow crops, how to do it better
right.
than, you know, I've read articles in the old Barnstable Patriot where Lindsay Armstrong would give talks, Howard Kroll, there were a number of, a hallway, there were a number
They
of.
had wonderful bean suppers too every
Oh.
Saturday. you know.
Yes, yeah.
Everybody made the beans and pies. Yeah.
Yeah.
And my Sam and I was the first president.
Yeah, Sam Nye, Mom's great-grandfather, was the first master of the Grange, and our family was kind of in the center of things, but there were many other enthusiastic families.
Yes.
you read the old accounts of the meetings, and they're very entertaining. They would talk about, they would have a bird program where everybody would go bird watching in the, about 100 years ago, in the World War I era, and discuss it, what they saw, and botany and crops, and mixed in with the crazy entertainments, rummage sales.
And rummage sales and plays and yeah.
My grandmother was the first woman master.
Was she really?
Yeah.
They had women
The Grange was technically a what we call a secret fraternity. It had a ritual. The meetings were technically secret.
Yeah.
I think part of the psychology there was a ritual and a series of lessons that were taught, and they wanted to not be. It was more comfortable to keep it. The public could join, but
Sure.
it was a fraternity technically. But
Yeah.
the nice thing was it involved women, because
Right from the start,
the Masons and other organizations were male oriented, but
Yes.
this was a farm family
Yeah.
organization, which was kind of progressive thing to do.
Well, they probably recognized that with farms, the women worked just as hard on the farms, you know, in the houses and on the farms as men did. So that was really,
They
you know, a
had-
recognition,
Yeah.
perhaps, of that.
They installed all the offices and everybody had to have something to say. And I was a floral at one time, and I think I remember it. Beautify and adorn your home with flowers. A home that is thus made fragrant and beautiful is...
You almost got it.
You almost got it.
Yeah. I forgot the rest.
Yeah,
of
well,
it.
that was.
Oh, that's
And
nice.
These are very complicated, you had to learn.
Oh, and you had to memorize it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we loved the bean suppers and everything too.
Yeah, I remember my little part. I won't say it because it's too long. But the master.
He was a master one time.
Oh.
Yeah.
The last master, wasn't he?
Yeah. Brothers and sisters, as we are again to separate and mingle with the world, let us not forget the precepts of our order. Let us add dignity to labor, and in our dealings with our fellow men be honest, just, and fear not. We must avoid intemperance in eating, drinking, and language. Also in work and recreation, and whatever we do, strive to do well. There's more. Let us be quiet, peaceful citizens, feeding the hungry, helping the fatherless and the widows, and keeping ourselves unspotted from the world.
Imagine learning all that.
Well, what a wonderful mission statement. That's
It
really,
is.
that's really
That's
what that
what
was.
they should do today.
Yeah, yes, yeah. Well, this has been wonderful. I
One
am,
more.
oh, please.
If you have time.
Yes.
This is just such a strange thing. But we were climbing a pear tree up in the orchard, and we were up in the trees, and we had a big Doberman pincher.
Oh,
Dog. You may want to take it out, I don't know.
no, that's fine.
Anyway, the dog looked up, there was a little hill with some pines. Dog looked up at the hill and went and barked. Well, that's always when somebody's around. I
Sure.
looked up where he was looking, and there was a figure in a black dress, long black robe.
Really?
And I said, look up there. And they looked up and there was nothing there. And we went up there and looked, and the dog went and sniffed all around with a
Really?
this other thing. And I don't believe it.
In ghosts?
No, but
What do you
was
think
so real,
But you can't explain it.
I can't explain
No.
it. No. It was
And
a-
if it was a person, it would have been very difficult to run through the woods and get away from you. You
I
being-
know it.
Yeah.
And of course my mother had only died a year or two before that, and but
Oh.
I still, it bothers me because
It's still vivid in
it
your
sounds
mind.
like I made it up, but
No. What an interesting
yeah,
story that you really don't have an answer for.
no.
No. Well, as I say, this has been just wonderful. I want to thank you for inviting us into your home,
Oh,
your
you're
most
welcome.
wonderful home. And I want to say to the people that will be watching this video, Thank you for doing that. As I say, this is another conversation that we've had of Tell Me a Story. Again, it is brought to you by the Friends of the Sandwich Town Archives. And we'll be doing much more. And we thank you for watching. Bye for now.